Mr. Ben, along with Dr. Clark and others, have been to the mountaintop. They looked over to the other side. And then they've been yelling and screaming to those of us down in the valley to come up to the mountaintop and see for yourself. Many of us have been able to work our way up and stand at their sides and see for ourselves. But too many of us are in the valley, lost, and we cannot see what is on the other side. Alone, they have changed the whole of history. They've destroyed the big lie. They've created a new concept of African self, a new concept of African consciousness.
So that man is one. There are no races, really. You have the African as the beginning of the human race, but the others are mutations. They're not races in the true sense of the word. Race is a social concept. That was to come later. And after the slave trade, when Europe conquered Africa, etc., then blackness and color became associated with being in a low position, so that therefore colors and races became associated with certain things. Those are things that are going to pass as we recover our history and transform ourselves. But initially, you have the pink African who becomes the European. He undergoes certain changes over a period of time. For example, in the ice, it's important to have long hair to protect the neck from cold. In heat, it's important that you have short hair follicles so that heat can escape. These things have nothing to do with inferiority or superiority. They have to do with
environmental needs.
Environmental necessities, environmental imperatives. So that you would find in Africa, some people have narrow noses where there's dry heat. Some people have thinner lips, some people have fuller lips, some people have close cropped hair, some people have wavy hair, etc. This has nothing to do with inferiority or superiority. It doesn't even have anything to do with beauty. Because the first great Europeans who met the first great Africans, the Greeks, when they went to Egypt and they met the blacks, they thought black was beautiful. It was quite the opposite, because the first whites were so startled by black achievement in Egypt and so many whites came to study in Africa, in Egypt, that they associated great intelligence and great beauty with blackness. They actually began to take black gods, because the first, for example, Europeans started to worship Isis, a black goddess. They started to have temples to Isis. Eventually, later on, Horus, who was the son of Isis and the son of Osiris, the male and female aspects of God, Europe initially worshipped the black Christ. So that this kind of racism that later occurred after the slave trade, this assumption about blackness associated with inferiority, that's a later thing in history. And you see, we are overwhelmed at the moment by that period, so that we have forgotten what really happened in the history of the world.
And so for approximately how many years was the world populated exclusively and only by Africans, black Africans?
Okay,
black skinned.
If you're talking about the modern, the last African, okay, because you see, the African is not only the first hominid, he's also the first human. Okay, the hominid is not completely human like us, but then comes the first human with our brain case. That's also African. And this begins to change about 55,000 years ago in Europe, where you get Africoid types becoming Caucasoid types, where you have what is called as Cro-Magnon man. This is the what we crudely call today white man, as against what we crudely call today black man. Okay, they're really just human beings. Okay, but they undergo superficial changes, skin changes, etc. And later on, you would have other changes like the narrow nose in ice versus the broader nose in heat. But you'd have the narrow nose also in dry heat, so that you would have superficial changes in the face of man, related nothing to his intelligence, his brain, or anything, related to the environment, the amount of sun, the kind of food you eat in particular environments, the kind of qualities of heat, qualities of cold, etc. No, I don't think it's a question of humanity. I do not believe in theories of people being more human than others. I do believe, however, and the evidence bears us out, that whereas the Africans had the opportunities to destroy European civilizations whenever they invaded Europe, whether it was under the Grimaldis before the emergence of Cro-Magnon man, whether it was under the Moors, when with other peoples they were in Egypt, they were in Europe, whether it was under Hannibal, when even Taharqa made an excursion into a part of Europe, they found him in Spain, the European profited in all the circumstances. Never was his civilization shattered. Whereas when the Europeans invaded, they wiped out cultures. And that is a very odd thing.
That speaks not of humanity,
It speaks of very extraordinary circumstances. How this can be translated in terms of whether you have different kinds of human beings or different type of human consciousness or different human character, perhaps in terms of the social character of the African. You see, the African never believed that, for example, if he has a religion and he conquers another person or walks into another territory, he has to plaster it down on them. The times when these invasions were made, it was times when Europe thought, or at least she liked to think, in order to cover up, to assuage her guilty conscience, that she could say, well, look, I've come on the name of Christ, in the name of God, to save these souls, so that she therefore found it necessary to wipe out everything. Like, for example, in America, she destroyed all the books in America except 3.
Well, did the African ever do that?
They never did that
Europe?
because...
Did the African ever enslave the European?
No. No, you don't have evidence of that. And this is not only a question of humanity, it has to do, as I say, with the assumption with which you move forward, that what are you doing? The African, for example, did not have these monolithic religions where you would go like the Arab or the Christians, the European Christians, when they distorted Christianity, would go and say, in the name of such and such, I'm going to wipe you out. I don't think the African invader ever operated under those premises, so that you can have a totally different kind of impact occurring.
I came to the States in the Second World War.
Why?
Well, the boat was coming to the States.
Okay.
And I had a man who was supposed to be uncle. I said supposed because there's arguments. So this, in my family life is kind of argumental as to who I am really in those contexts. And he and another man brought the numbers to America, Casper Hussein, he and Pompey. So I came to and spoke with him.
Where was this? What city?
Here in New York.
All right.
And
Harlem?
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I made my ground here for a while.
What year was that you came to New York?
I came in 1944, I think, 43, 44.
Mm-hmm.
And
right in the middle of things.
Right in the middle of the war. Yeah. And then I made some contacts. I had wanted to go to school here. I've always had a fascination to go to Columbia University, but they weren't taking people with my color in certain professions, certain disciplines.
Did they tell you right to your face?
Oh yes, so an adult, you had applications with a form, and you had to put your picture. And then they had many kinds. You had colored, Negro, and foreign. So you got to come from Africa and get in to study where you couldn't get in as a Negro or a colored. And they had different classes. If you were foreign black, you want a Negro or you want a colored. They had all kind of stupid classifications. And so, and then there were time foreign black, Negro, colored. You just couldn't get in, period, because that discipline, they didn't take black people or African people to study in that area.
What was this discipline you were trying to get into at Columbia?
Anthropology.
Anthropology.
Yeah.